exactly how this pans out really remains to be seen. Two things I think I would say before I introduce first speaker. Preparatory work behind the scenes has been going for quite a while now, probably a year or more. We've got a good lot of data, particularly mapped data. There's a lot of thought going on, a lot of thinking going on. But there are two big requirements to really make that begin to happen. One is the DEFRA guidelines, which we're waiting for with enthusiasm, and Julian hopefully will give us a few hints as to how that's developing. So we await for that because that really will set the scene. And the second thing is the involvement of stakeholders, many of whom are here today. You know, this has got to be an interactive and engaged process, and it's really good that so many people have joined in today. We will be looking to you, others will be looking to you, the responsible authority will be looking to you to take this forward in the coming year or two. So that's all that I want to say by way of introduction. I hope that sets the scene reasonably well for what follows. It's an important day. I've said several times, my final remark, I've said several times to Sarah Jennings over the last year or two, that as far as I'm concerned, local nature recovery strategies are probably the most important bit of our agenda at the moment, because I think they potentially pull together so many different strands of the work that the partnership does. So it's quite high stakes, I think. Okay, so it gives me great pleasure to welcome Julian Harlow from DEFRA, who is the head of local nature recovery strategy policy. So we've got the person who's absolutely at the heart of that. And we're grateful, Julian, because we know that pressure on your time must be very great at the moment. So thank you so much for giving up some time to talk to us, and over to you.
Thank you, Michael, and you're very welcome. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks very much for inviting me. Bella, I think I've got a few slides and I'm hoping you're going to host them for me, if that's all right.
Yeah, very nice.
Brilliant, thank you. And while Bella is getting those up on the screen, yes, I'm Julian Harlow. I head up the local nature recovery strategy policy team in DEFRA, and I'm also deputy head of the land use policy team. I'm saying that to reassure you that I sit right next to and are part of a wider team that includes biodiversity net gain, environmental planning, and links to DLUC, the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities too. So we are very much operating in that space, and that's where I sit as head of the LNRS policy team. So for the next 10 minutes or so, I will quickly whiz through the national policy context, basically just develop what Michael's said a little bit further and give you a flavour of what LNRSs are, where we've got to, and hopefully instill a little bit more enthusiasm for them, if that is even needed. So next slide, please, Bella. What are LNRSs? Basically, in a nutshell, if you've never heard of them before and you're looking to take something away from certainly my 10 minutes, it's as follows. They are a new requirement in the Environment Act. They are essentially a new system of spatial strategies that would agree priorities for nature's recovery and associated wider environmental benefits. I will come back to this theme a lot. They will map proposals to deliver those priorities. So there's a spatial element to local nature recovery strategies that is really important and new. They will cover the whole of England, no gaps and no overlaps, and they will be locally led. Michael mentioned the responsible authorities. That's a key design feature of the policy. And in essence, they are a key initiative to help us deliver on our environmental improvement plans and our new environmental targets. And I'm saying this really so that we have the right link between the local and the national ambition that is encapsulated in the Environment Act too. Very important. In a nutshell, that is LNRSs. Next slide, please. That's what they are. Where did they come from? Just a quick look back for the last couple of years as to how we've got the policy we've got. So they were first announced in 2019 as part of the government's response to the biodiversity net gain consultation. That consultation essentially revealed that habitat mapping opportunities to guide the provision of compensatory habitat so that it delivers, each individual action delivers more than their individual parts. It's part of a wider vision. A lot of support for that. And basically the government then announced it would legislate for LNRSs as part of the Environment Act then bill. And that was back in 2019. But I think the roots of the policy go back way further, as I'm sure you guys well know. It very much reflects the experience of LNPs and other partnerships at the coalface. And it's clear for some time, I think, that spatial planning is going to be a key component of our nature recovery efforts, and that a lot of existing efforts were perhaps falling a little bit short and weren't gaining the traction, I guess, that they need to have on different decision makers or delivery levers. So that was the origins of the strategies. Next slide, please, Bella. And the vision very much reflects some of the challenges that we're facing. So the vision, as announced and still very much alive and kicking today, is for a tool that maps the locations where creating or improving habitat is going to achieve the most in the widest possible sense. For a tool that would focus on nature recovery, but also capture these wider environmental benefits that we so often get from different types of habitat enhancement or creation. So flood risk mitigation, water quality, Michael mentioned the climate emergencies, access, recreation, you name it, the full suite of benefits can be delivered through nature's recovery, and that's very much within the scope of the LNRS. We need something that delivers for biodiversity net gain, so it very much is LNRSs are a sister policy of biodiversity net gain, but they have to have that wider role. In particular, very keen for LNRSs to support local plans and essentially coordinate public and private action for nature recovery. That's absolutely critical, I think. They also need to have strong local leadership and collaboration. This can't be done at a national level in the same way that you guys can do things locally. Those two tiers have to work together. But the local has to operate as part of the national as well. So that's very much part of the LNRS vision. And that translated through essentially into what we have in the Environment Act. Next slide, please, Bella. Now, I don't want to bore you guys to death, but it is worth just kind of pausing momentarily on what is actually in the Environment Act. It's not a complex piece of legislation. There are essentially 5 clauses, 4 of which have the kind of the substance. And the first is section 104 of the Act. And all this really does is require that LNRSs have to exist in England. So they are a legal requirement. And LNRSs have to cover the whole of England, as I mentioned earlier, and that clause essentially establishes the rules for the DEFRA Secretary of State to determine the areas. In short, LNRSs have to be based on local authority boundaries, and that is a conscious decision. Section 105 is all about the process that has to be followed when preparing the LNRS. They'll be led by responsible authorities. The DEFRA Secretary of State will appoint responsible authorities, and it can issue regulations on the process that each responsible authority has to follow in preparing the LNRS. Really, really important. Michael, you alluded to the devil in the detail. Hopefully there won't be devils in the detail, but nevertheless, there will be important details in the regulations. And this is all part and parcel of having a locally led system, but that talks to kind of national standards and requirements as well. So regulations, very much an important part of the policy. And I'll say a tad more about that shortly. Section 106 is all about what has to be in the strategies. The Act requires there to be 2 things. One is a statement of biodiversity priorities, and the other is a local habitat map. And the Act provides for government to issue guidance on what each of those components ought to contain, essentially what LNRSs ought to contain. So that's another important part of the policy and the detail. Finally, Section 107 is about requirements on national government to support local areas in preparing the strategies. So there is a requirement, for example, for government to publish a national habitat map, and also to think about other data that might be useful for responsible authorities when preparing their LNRSs. In essence, that's the legislation, the underpinning legislation. Not complex, more detail coming, as we will get on to now. Next slide, please, Bella. But briefly, before we touch on next steps, what is not in the Act is, I think, as important as what is in it. So LNRSs sit alongside biodiversity net gain. as we've already mentioned, but there are also requirements in the Environment Act for public authorities to have regard to LNRSs as part of a strengthened biodiversity duty, and that's an important element too in terms of delivery. But just to reinforce that although the Act requires that LNRSs exist, that they're created, it doesn't require that they are then delivered, and that is by design. This is an issue that came up time after time as part of passage of the Environment Act through Parliament. And that's because a lot of the delivery levers that will help to deliver the strategies on the ground fall outside of the Environment Act. So, for example, there's a whole load of stuff going on planning reform at the minute with the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill. Links to planning are going to be critically important for LNRSs. In fact, there is a requirement in the Environment Act for us to issue further guidance on how planning authorities will have to take account of LNRSs. And that's under development, but it's an important part that's not in the Environment Act. Similarly, for the funding sources, I think Michael mentioned to start with, tree planting, peatland restoration, other sources of investment in nature recovery are going to be an important part of the delivery picture that are outside the Environment Act, as to our agri-environment schemes and the new ELM schemes, key delivery levers as well. So I think the real power of LNRSs, although they're legislated for, is going to go much further than their legislative underpinnings. It's going to be about how they drive integration and effectiveness, improved effectiveness across a whole range of different delivery levers. And because they're aiming to do that, they're seeking to do that, LNRSs are going to need to work for a lot of different interests, different policies, different users, and they are going to have that broad local support as part of a national picture. As Michael, you said right at the start, collaboration and buy-in is going to be critical, I think. Next slide, please. Last one from me then, just next steps. What are we doing at the minute? We are trying to put in place as quickly as possible the national framework ahead of preparation commencing across England. That will involve the regulations, as I mentioned before, and the statutory guidance setting out what each strategy has to contain, two key pieces of the national policy framework. We will also need to confirm areas and responsible authorities, and their conversations we're currently having with ministers at the minute. We'll also need to confirm funding and new burdens, particularly for local authorities. I'm very conscious there's an awful lot of interest in how much funding will be made available. I can't confirm that yet, but we are talking to ministers about that, and we have made public commitments to cover all new burdens associated with the Environment Bill. I mentioned the data and analysis that we will publish nationally to support local areas, but more broadly, we're looking at what support we can provide, again, nationally, in other forms to support preparation of LNRSs locally too. So lots still to do, making good progress. We've completed 5 pilots, which I still think were excellent initiatives. We've completed a consultation on the regulations and the guidance, which I think gives you a really good flavour for what is likely to be contained in them. We will respond to that shortly too. And we have provisionally agreed with 48 responsible authorities for them to perform those roles, subject to confirmation with ministers. And as I said, we're talking to them in real time. And that's really the next steps for us. That's what we've got to do. We hope to do that as soon as possible. And I would really like to give everyone a sense of timescales. I can't at the minute though, not until ministers confirm that. They are very active discussions that are ongoing. As soon as I have any news on that, I will let everyone know. Hopefully that was okay, did the job of teeing things up. I think that's me done.
Thank you very much indeed, Julian. That was very crisp and very thorough, and I think really gives us sets the scene very well. Hopefully you can stay on, and we'll have some questions later. But now we are going to have a video, which I've not yet.
Can I just interrupt? Sorry, I put this on chat just to make it clear to everyone we're not going to open up the screen for verbal questions. So please, as Isabel has just done, put them in the chat. Just see my request there. And then Tracy Brooks from Torbay will pick out some questions and ask them. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Okay, so so the video.
Okay, just going to play this now. Hopefully it works, but do stop me, Sarah, if you can't hear it or see it.
Okay, fingers crossed. Good luck.
We all know that Devon supports an amazing diversity of landscapes and wildlife, from the peat bogs of Dartmoor through wooded river valleys, rolling farmland and urban parks, to our 2 coasts and incredible marine habitats. What we sometimes forget is that this environment underpins our lives. It provides us with food, water, carbon storage, flood control, great recreational and business opportunities, and a natural health service. However, we've witnessed a huge deterioration in the health of our environment due to complex factors such as habitat loss, pesticides, disease, pollution, and climate change. Water voles went extinct, and breeding curlews are on the brink. When was the last time you heard a cuckoo? To help us reverse these declines and create a nature recovery network, the Environment Act requires responsible authorities to develop local nature recovery strategies. These will set out priorities, opportunities, and actions for recovering biodiversity and must include a local habitats map. The strategies must also support wider objectives such as carbon storage, flood control, water quality, and health and well-being. DEFRA guidance and funding for the strategies is not yet out, and responsible authorities are not yet named. However, we do know that DEFRA wants county-level strategies led by higher-tier authorities, working in collaboration with partners, and for preparatory work to begin. Devon County Council, Plymouth City Council, Torbay Council, and Natural England have therefore formed a small team to start work on Devon's strategy under the umbrella of the local nature partnerships. We're starting to work with experts to update our State of Environment report, and will continue work on our Nature Recovery Network map. We'll work with partners to get an overview of all the great existing initiatives and success stories, and we'll also identify gaps, challenges, and solutions. Critically, we need your views on what you want from the strategy, as it must be useful. We will involve a huge range of sectors, including farmers. The strategy needs to guide agri-environment funding and help the farming sector to better manage and protect the environment on which it depends. Developers and planners. The strategy needs to provide an evidence base for local plans, guide biodiversity net gain funding, and ensure we all have access to wildlife-rich spaces. Community groups and schools. The strategy needs to help community groups and schools to connect with nature. Health and well-being. The strategy needs to link with the work of Devon Local Nature Partnerships Naturally Healthy Forum. We need to make this strategy as inclusive, positive, and impactful as possible. We want everyone across Devon to be talking about wildlife and taking action to recover our healthy natural environment. Here's how to get involved. I think that worked.
That worked extremely well. I hadn't seen this before, so well done. Bella, brilliant voiceover. Absolutely, it's first class. And Sarah, obviously the script. So I think that's been really helpful, and hopefully that will get some wide viewing, and it's something that can be looked at quite quickly and easily by people. So great, well done. Let's move on then to Sarah to give her talk from the sort of Devon perspective, county ecologist, LNP manager, and well, lots of things really, but that'll do for now.
Okay, Bella's showing slides. And I just want to say massive thank you to Bella and others for putting that together. So we did it ridiculously quickly, didn't we, Bella? And so lots of people were asked to share images very quickly, and Neil, who produced it, I think did a really good job. So phew. We were really worried it might not happen. Bella, lots of people have put something on chat. Is it already on the website, the link? But if not, we will be putting it on, won't we?
The link for the video?
Yeah.
No, it's not. But will happen after this. Yeah, straight
Yeah.
away. So
we didn't want to release it. Bella was quite keen to, but I thought we won't release it until we've done this webinar. So it will be on the website, and we're also going to promote it via social media so that lots of people can use it to promote it, and also we'll be able to update it as well quite easily as things progress and we've got the guidance and know a bit more about what we're doing. So we will do that. Okay, can everybody see the slides? So on my screen, it's that's it, great. Okay, so I'm just going to, I've got some more boring slides, I'm afraid, no nice pictures, that was in the video, just to give you a quick update on what we're doing at the moment. And Bella's showing them, so I'll just keep saying next slide, Bella. I haven't got many slides. As Michael said, I'm the county ecologist at DCC and run the local nature partnership as well. Thanks, Bella. Okay, so I can't see, a few people said this on chat, I can't see what the heading is, but I think the heading is structure. So as Julian said, we don't yet have responsible authorities or the guidance. So we don't yet have a formal governance structure for the Devon, Torbay and Plymouth local nature recovery strategy. So that will be developed and confirmed after the DEFRA guidance and regulations are published. But we are starting to do work already on the local nature recovery strategy, hence today. So it's been agreed that for the Devon County Council bit and the Torbay bit, it will be done under the umbrella of the local nature partnership. So hence we've got this meeting today chaired by Michael Winter, who is chair of the LNP. So the board and the working group bring together lots of the relevant partners, and it's a very cross-sectoral as well. So there's no point in reinventing the wheel. We've already got that partnership, and that's going to be critical. Team Devon brings together Devon County Council and the districts. Local authorities are going to be key to this. So Team Devon have, we've taken a presentation on the LNRS to them a while ago, and we're keeping them informed, and they could well form part of the governance structure. We've also set up an initial very small local nature recovery strategy team. So at the moment, it includes the higher tier authorities and Natural England. So the key contacts are myself from Devon County Council, Mike Oxford from Plymouth, who's going to be speaking in a bit, Tracy Brooks from Torbay, who is our question meister this morning, and Kathy Fitzroy, who is Natural England have appointed LNRS officers across the country. And Kathy, who many of you might know, she's been around for a long time, if I can say that, Kathy. So she is brilliantly our Natural England officer. We also, so Devon County Council had got internal funding already because we knew that we were going to get the DEFRA money. So we have a pot of money to spend this year. So we have appointed a part-time project manager to oversee the LNRS process. We appointed someone a few months ago. Unfortunately, really unfortunately, he's had to step back due to health reasons. So I'm looking for somebody else and hopefully going to appoint somebody next week to pick up that role. And we also, as you can see, have appointed Bella as our brilliant communication and engagement officer. So she is full-time at Devon County Council on this and other local nature partnership issues. Next slide. Okay, so we are in the process of putting together a stakeholder and communications plan. So there are a few key words that I'll keep saying. So collaboration is a key word for this. Collaboration is essential in pulling together the local nature recovery strategy. So a stakeholder plan is essential. Just to get the marine element in here, so the LNRS, we don't quite know where DEFRA guidance is going, but it has been agreed that because marine is so important for Devon that we have got to include marine in this. So our plan includes marine and terrestrial stakeholders. We are in the process of creating a spreadsheet, a massive spreadsheet, isn't it, Bella, of all the key organisations, partnerships and individuals to try and get a grip on all of the people out there that need to be involved in this. And we're identifying gatekeepers, so a key contact for each of these organisations and partnerships who can help us to speak to everybody else. We're doing some work on stakeholder analysis and we'll use that to form an engagement plan of meetings, questionnaires, workshops. So that is all in process. And today really is the first thing of that, to try and get everybody involved in the LNRS and aware and thinking about it. And the Devon, we set up probably about 6 months ago, a Devon-wide communications group under the banner of the Local Nature Partnership, which Claire Groom chairs, and that is going to play a critical role in this. Communication is going to be key. Next slide, Bella. So this is a very quick slide that I did last night to show you how complex this is. Devon is big, it's a huge county, and it is very complicated. So this is just a quick indication of all the partners on our stakeholder list. So we've got 2 national parks, 5 O&Bs, a biosphere reserve, 3.5 catchment partnerships, 8 district councils, 2 unitaries, Devon County Council, 426 parish councils, 2 brilliant universities, loads of partnerships, the local enterprise partnership, the climate partnership, food partnership, lots of groups, planning officers group, the Devon Hedge group, the Countryside Access Forum, loads of community groups doing great work for wildlife. We've got the communities sector, so we have Devon Communities Together, Devon Voluntary Action, we have in the top right-hand corner all the health work. Absolutely, I won't go on, but this just shows you, you know, a tiny number of the partnerships organisations that we need to involve in this strategy. So don't get cross if you're not shown here. This is just an example. And so we've already got quite a few partnerships. So that we've got under the LMP, the Naturally Healthy Forum, which Kate Hind and Active Devon run. So that brings together clinical commissioning groups, GPs, naturally healthy providers, public health. So that's a great way to talk to that sector in one go. We've got the LMP Network for Environmental Educators in Devon, which brings together schools, Paint and Zoo, Devon Wildlife Trust, all sorts of organisations, which again is a great network that we can use for the local nature recovery strategy. And I've already been talking to a lot of these networks as to what the LNRS is and how we can work with them to ensure that these issues are integrated into what we're doing. Okay, next slide. I'm just letting a few people in. Okay, so we're doing stakeholder analysis. We are also, so there's lots of work we won't do because we don't yet have the guidance, but we do know that we need to update and collate baseline information. So we've got the Devon State of Environment report that is on the LMP website. So we're doing an update of that, which is something we've said we're going to do for a while. So Bella and also Beth Bird in our team are updating that at the moment. I'm probably in touch with quite a few of you. We are also part of the State of Environment report is much more detailed State of Nature report. So Mike Waller in our team is leading on that and has set up a steering group with LMP partners. And the first meeting of that steering group is Wednesday afternoon this week. We're also starting through the stakeholder analysis and work with partners to collate information on existing priorities and projects. So that is what we're starting to do at the moment. We need to do a lot more of. That's going to be a team effort, but we need to know what Devon Wildlife Trust priorities are, what South West Water's priorities are across the county, what projects are going on, what the gaps are, and also critically asking partners how the local nature recovery strategy can be useful. So there's absolutely no point in doing this if it's not going to be useful for you. And I attended a community action group conference on Saturday, gave a presentation about community action for wildlife and also ran an impromptu workshop. And so I used that as an opportunity to talk to people about what they need to take, what community groups need to take action for wildlife and what they think of a local nature recovery strategy. And this is just a quick quote from Jill, who is a lovely, passionate lady who's a Teambridge wildlife warden. And so she was saying we have lots of strategies out there already, but what she really wants is to pin local authorities down on how green space will be managed for wildlife. And we don't want this to be wishy-washy. That was her turn. So I asked if I could quote her at this webinar this morning. So Michael, we meant to make sure this is absolutely not wishy-washy. I thought that's quite a good quote. So we are also continuing work on the Devon Nature Recovery nature map. So that is identifying areas of wildlife importance, priorities and opportunities. So as Julian said earlier, the local habitats map is going to be a key part of the LNRS. And so our nature recovery, nature mapping work will form the local habitats map. So it's still early days. Phase 1 is still in draft, but it is up on the DCC environment viewer with guidance on the LMP website. We have a steering group reconvened last week, and it is led by Ed Carl-Ferris at Devon Wildlife Trust and Devon Biodiversity Record Centre doing loads of work on that. So please, please do have a look at that. We've got lots of work still to do on it in terms of connectivity mapping and other things, but we need to know what you want from mapping so that it's going to be useful useful, because that is one very clear way of making this all visible to you. Next slide. I've almost finished. Okay, so next steps. Next steps really, so we're going to be doing all this ongoing stuff, but next steps will be agreed when the guidance regs and funding are out. Likely though that we will all obviously need to discuss the findings from the baseline work. So what has come out of it? What are our priorities? What are our opportunities for wildlife? And what are the measures or actions that we need to take? And just to reiterate that the final product does need to be useful for all audiences, the audiences that you saw in our video. So whether you're a farmer, a lighting engineer, a developer, a community group, a GP, whoever you are, this has got to be useful so that you know how you can help nature's recovery and help people connect with wildlife. Basically, it can't be a dry strategy that sits on a shelf or on a website, and it has to be simple and it has to be visible. And we need to know how we achieve that from you. Next slide, Bella. I think there's one left. Is it stuck? Ooh, okay, so last slide is how to engage. As a starting point, Bella and I have set up a super simple questionnaire that is on the LNP website. So if you've got any ideas, thoughts whatsoever, please share them via the questionnaire. It really has only got one main question. So you want to know roughly who you are. You can share whatever details you like to share about who you are. And how you think the LNRS will be useful to you. Also tries to capture if there's anything you want to share in terms of brilliant stuff that you're doing for wildlife already, so that we can celebrate it, share it with others to inspire them, then please share that as well. So it could take you 5 minutes or an hour to fill it in, it's up to you. We think there might be a bit of a glitch with it. We've done it by Google questionnaires at the moment, so we're going to put it onto a simpler platform, but it will be the same questions. So also join the LNP forum. You can do that via the website. You'll then get the newsletter with updates and information. Attend our conference. We're going to have a big local nature partnership conference in the spring focused on the LNRS. Follow us via Facebook and Twitter. Please use that to share ideas, start a discussion, and see our website for more information in time. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Sarah, for that whistle-stop tour through all that you're doing and colleagues are doing. I see vast numbers of questions coming up. I suspect we won't be able to answer all of them, but I mean, our commitment is to try and sort of answer some of them on the web page, but also, I mean, we can follow up if necessary outside the meeting. But Tracy has very kindly, and I know she was volunteered to do this quite not long before the meeting, so thanks Tracy Brooks. You're going to sort of try and group together some of these questions and put them now.
Yes, I was volunteered to do this at short notice, but that's fine. Lovely questions. Can I just there are a couple that have been answered in the chat, but I thought I'd mention it to everybody. So one question was whether there was nature recovery mapping available, and you'll see that there is via the DCC environment viewer.
Tracy, you're very quiet. Sorry to interrupt. You're very
quiet.
Very
unusual for me. Goodness.
I don't know whether you're not near enough your microphone or something.
Sorry, apologies for that.
Better. That's
so
better.
Just to let you know, sorry, that there was an inquiry about the nature recovery mapping and where we are, and there is a link in the chat for the environment viewer and where there's a nature recovery mapping. There was also a question about the 5 pilots which were listed as Cornwall, Greater Manchester, Northumberland and Buckinghamshire. And there is again a link there kindly provided by Becky Hughes to those 5 pilots on the government website. There was also a question about whether the video could be put onto the YouTube, and I'm sure it can be, Bella, can't it? Lovely. Right.
Yes, it will be. Yeah,
some of them. Excellent. So one of the more in-depth questions was really relating to the land use framework. So Sue's asking, how does this strategy relate to the land use framework in Devon?
Shall I have a quick stab and then Sarah come in? I mean, basically there's a lot of overlap in terms of what they might be doing and thinking about, but they're quite different in the sense that the LNRS is a statutory duty for us all, as well as a great opportunity. So this is part, this is part of our law, part of our government whereas the land use framework is a voluntary initiative from a charity. And Devon just happens to be a place where this is happening. I mean, I hope we'll learn quite a lot from it, but I don't, there's certainly no overlap in terms of the purpose. There might be overlap in terms of some sort of substantive, some of the stuff that's talked about. I don't, Sarah, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we're working closely with them, aren't we, Michael?
Yeah, Sarah and I are both on the management group, and so we kind of know what's going on.
Yeah, and they're doing some case studies at the moment. So again, we will get involved in that and find out how it links to the LNRS.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. Their case study work could be really useful and helpful. And I noticed in the chat a number of you drawing our attention or reminding people of the different local initiatives that are already going on and nature recovery plans that have been drawn up in the North Devon Biosphere or the Cliffs Valley Regional Park or wherever. Yeah, all of that is grist for the mill. I mean, that's precisely the sort of information that will be incredibly useful when we try and pull things all together. So there's no sort of competition here. It's just different activities going on at different scales. But the role of the LNRS will be to somehow pull a lot of this together in a strategic way, in a coherent way. I don't know whether Julian wishes to add anything to all of that, because he must have come across this sort of thing quite a bit as well.
No, Mike, I think you've captured it really well. There are links between all these initiatives. One of the things we will be really keen for LNRSs to do is to reach out, look at other existing strategies, spatial or otherwise, and bring together different priorities from across different interests and sectors. And I thought Sarah explained that brilliantly. Actually, that's exactly the sentiment behind it. I noticed a couple of questions coming up on marine as well, and the links to salt water. Yes, I think they're important. That was one of the things that we looked at in the 5 pilots. So there were 3 that did have that kind of coastal terrestrial marine interface. And I thought they did a brilliant job of looking beyond their boundaries into the marine environment. Strictly speaking, LNRSs will stop with the local authority boundaries, but that doesn't mean that they can't incorporate issues 2 ways between terrestrial and marine. And I mean, that goes for terrestrial boundaries as well. We are mindful that, we have to draw boundaries somewhere. It's really important that I think we go with kind of administrative boundaries. So, the 48 provisional areas we have at the minute, I think, are coherent in that respect. But it's important to look beyond those boundaries as well, and to look at neighbouring strategy areas and how the proposals in your LNRS will interface with those of the surrounds, either terrestrial or marine.
I'm very conscious of time. We're sort of trespassing into the perspectives we're going to get. So I'm inclined, I think, if Sarah and Tracy think it's okay to say, let's move on and deal with the questions offline, put answers up on the web page and direct communication with people. I think that's probably the best thing to do. I just must comment on one thing from Adam Davison. Are you interested in South Devon? I just happened to talk. Yes, very interested in South Devon, interested in every bit of Devon. So,
Michael, can I just say, I mean, I think from what Julian said, I did make it clear, but we absolutely are going to be, I'm going to the A&B managers meeting in a couple of weeks, and so we're absolutely linking this up to the A&B nature plans and national park plans and everything else. It's got to be a nested suite of plans is the term that we've always been using. So we have to see how it all integrates. And it's all got to be useful and simple, and we don't want to confuse people.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, I don't want to, we must move on, but Sarah's absolutely right there. And I thought Sarah's map of the complexity in Devon is greater than in some counties, and we've not got a unitary and all that sort of thing. So that, and we're a big county, and there's a heck of a lot going on, and there's a lot of different geographies at play. So yeah, and let's hear about some of those different geographies and different aspects of all this now. So everyone's been given firm instructions to stick to their 5 minutes. If they could even do it in less if they want to. So I'm going to first of all start with Nigel Mortimer, the Estuaries Officer for South Devon A&B. You see, South Devon is important, to talk a little bit about the marine aspects of all this. So Nigel, over to you.
Thank you. Can everybody see just one screen? Oh, not that one. Of an
see an
estuary.
estuary.
Just a nod to our funding partners.
Yep.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Nigel Mortimer. I'm the Estuaries Officer for South Devon Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty. I have a marine biology degree. I wanted to do marine biology before I even knew the term. And all my interests, my work are basically surrounded by salt water. Our estuaries, it's an odd ecology, really. This is an ecosystem. We are actually celebrating a fairly low diversity of wildlife, but the wildlife that can survive in these unusual conditions are there in huge numbers. Obviously, our estuaries are very heavily affected by the quality of waters flowing down from their catchment areas, but also to some extent from the waters that come in and out twice a day with the tides. We're unusual in South Devon, obviously, that we have two coasts, but you only have one ocean. We're very lucky that most of our coast and many of our estuaries are designated as marine protected areas, celebrating their specialness. Our marine environment is very special. This is a site off South Devon. You can just see the colour and variety there. And this is just south of the Yarm estuary. One of the issues that we have is that very often people treat our cloudy waters as our waters being dirty or polluted, when indeed actually they're an indicator of just how productive they are. And very often it's just the amount of plankton within them that causes that murk. If you look carefully, you can actually see an adult grey seal in that photograph. And it's sort of staying right at the edge of visibility, just watching me. What on a good day, we can see that colour and that variety. I mean, all too often we go to the Mediterranean or the likes, we have clear waters there, but that's because there's less plankton. But we see the wildlife, we think it's more special. It's just here we don't see enough of it. In our estuaries, very often we do see the birds, the variety, the colour and the numbers of them. But if you're able to peel away the water, the colour, the variety and the numbers of fish are even more special. Although I would have to argue that some of our marine worms are absolutely gorgeous. Have a look at those. Now, some of the ecosystems within our estuaries are very special, not just for their biodiversity, but for the amount of carbon that they take in, lock away and harbour for many and sort of geological timescales. Our salt marshes, our seagrass beds, tidal reed beds, and indeed our mudflats. And then on the open coast, the ocean ooze as well. The amount of carbon that these places harbour and lock away is globally important. I was going to say that, I've lost the script. Just over the last few years, we've had these excellent restoration handbooks. Unfortunately, they all came out slightly close together because ideally we would like to sort of take them all on board and march forward with all of them. As just an example, these are many of the ecosystem services given by salt marshes. And right now we're looking at the quality of the salt marshes around South Devon. We're looking at their state and what can be done to improve those so that they can be improved for their biodiversity, their benefits for water quality, and indeed the amount of carbon that they take up and lock away. We're looking at that right now. Go on, move forward. There you go. I'll take any questions on the chat. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. That wonderful pictures there. Thank you. Now, can we move rapidly on to Adam Westerway, who's a dairy farmer and Southwest representative for NFU's Organic Forum. So one of the questions in chat was, are farmers and landowners involved? And the simple answer is yes, of course, and have to be. So Adam, over to you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep, I can.
Okay. Yeah, my name's Adam Westaway. I'm organic dairy farmer, been farming organically for 25 years at Chumley. As Michael said, I'm elected to the National Organic Forum as a Southwest representative, and I'm also appointed to the NFU's National Dairy Board. We milk 180 cows with 180 followers on 330 acres of grassland, including 40 acres of species rich. We have approximately 40 acres of woodland, and we have 3 scheduled ancient monuments as well. And we are just in the progress of taking on 135 acres of, which is a Devon County wildlife site, which has got 16 acres of purple moor grass and 30 acres of semi-improved grassland. My interest in nature has always been integral within the farm, within hedges, buffers, corners left out, working with rather than against nature, extensive grazing. Within the video earlier, it mentioned, have we ever heard of the cuckoo? Well, I hear the cuckoo every year. I've also had lapwings return to the farm, skylarks nest. I found my first skylark's nest last year. And we also have a plethora of hedgehogs again. The local nature recovery will bring lots of challenges to us. There's financial challenges at the moment going through with the cost of production, pressure on agriculture, with the loss of BPS. There's infrastructural issues to overcome to protect water quality, air quality. There are massive changes within the agricultural industry going on. And then let's not also forget food security as well. One of the challenges I see through various schemes is timeframes and scales, lengths of agreements if they're brought in for farmers, possible get-out clauses for those wanting to retire or changing farming practices, and issues over possible repayment of any grants or subsidies given. We have an issue at the moment within our countryside stewardship agreement. We'd been in countryside stewardship in 2000 and started in 2000 for 10 years. And we had a break in between and rejoined stewardship 5 years ago, last January. And at that time, the criteria set by DEFRA within it, the only thing I signed up for was the organic maintenance payments because of the complex nature of all the other agreements. At the moment, I've just restarted with a mirror agreement within countryside stewardship, rolling on the old one, but I've had to sign up for 5 years. That then, therefore, my business has to stay organic for 5 years, or I have to pay all the money back. So there's always a conflict between the nature and business. With any agreement like that, some people are starting from a low base with nature. You know, there are issues within intensive grassland, intensive arable, but others are starting from utopia. And there's got to be it cannot be a one size fits all for everyone. I'd noticed on the presentation, it also said lots of partners. The farmers were one of the small boxes, but they can deliver on a majority of them. Having looked at Cornwall's draft, 9 out of the 12 priorities, agriculture can deliver on 9 of them.
Sorry, Adam, just a 1 minute warning.
Okay, thank you. I can see within these various agreements that some land will become more intensive, so some habitats will be lost. So there has to be a balance between the two. And also the balance between commercial opportunities, maybe through carbon storage and net gain and net biodiversity gain from outside sources. So that's just from the farming side how I see it. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. That was great. And we do recognise, of course, those of us in the sort of nature conservation world, but farmers and land managers are the most important stakeholder in many ways, because they manage and control most of the land. So we're really pleased to have you on board, and really interesting stuff. Let's move on then to Mike Oxford, who is the Natural Infrastructure Planning Manager from Plymouth City. A really important part of this is our urban areas as well. So over to you, Mike.
Thank you, Michael. Is my screen up for everybody?
Yep.
Okay. As Michael says, I'm the Natural Infrastructure Planning Manager for Plymouth. And the sort of emphasis for my role is around planning and development. So much of what I'm going to say this morning is sort of from that perspective. Let's see whether we can get rid of this. So I think it's important to say that our agenda increasingly now is in context with the Environment Act, and that certainly has, I think, council-wide implications, and that's just a couple of the duties that impose those responsibilities. And I think increasingly we're seeing that applies to pretty much all the functions and activities across the council, and certainly in terms of decisions being made, and also the functions and services that the council provides. And again, you know, directorates right across the council may become involved, and the ones in green, their strategic planning, street services and land and property, obviously more so at the moment. And we are responding to a climate and biodiversity emergency. Nature recovery obviously brings with it now the prospect of a local nature recovery strategy, and certainly here in Plymouth we're thinking both blue and green elements. And we're considering how that's going to inform planning policy, how we implement existing policies, and what further guidance we may need. And also in terms of actually what we deliver out on the ground across the city. And as you can see, there's a number of policy areas and mechanisms available to us. And I've just highlighted there in green some of the ones we're currently actually delivering on. And then likewise, there are a range of actions and activities, projects and so on that we can actually deliver. And again, Green Mines, our Plymouth Natural Grid, our network, Green Network, and the BNG Habitat Banking Vehicle are things that we're progressing at the moment. And of course, all of that hinges on a sound evidence base. So I thought I'd just give you a taste of what we're doing here. This is the city's designated wildlife sites, but of course we have a lot of other green space across the city as well. And we're beginning to look at how we can enhance both the designated sites and the other green space. And with this in mind, we undertook survey last year, and I've just highlighted, or that's Cannes Woods in the northwest part of the city, and we've conducted a UK habitat survey to find out what we've got, and from that we can work out what condition it's in, and we then have moved on to actually identify priorities for that site in terms of opportunities for enhancement. And that then feeds into our proposals and plans for biodiversity net gain, because we see that as a major way of delivering nature enhancement across the city. And we're able to then calculate how many biodiversity net gain units Cannes Woods might be able to provide for potential developers and investors. And at the moment, we've got about 35 of these sites across the city. And as you can see, they're largely based around some of the larger green areas. And that does, of course, then raise the question, what about the grey areas? Plymouth's population this year is somewhere around 240,000, and that's in about 8,000 hectares. Devon's population is about 110,000 across 670,000 hectares. So I think if my maths is correct, that means we've got about a third of the population in less than 2% of the land area. So people are an enormous opportunity for us, incredibly important to us, and also, of course, also put pressure on the green space that we have. And we've had a project running for some time now, looking at how we rewild the network, both from a community and people point of view, as well as nature. And the Green Minds project is something that has been sort of paving the way across the city in trying to do that.
Sorry, Mike, it's 1 minute. Thanks.
Okay. And obviously, there are huge parts of the city that are pretty grey. This is the city centre, and the centre of the slide is the Theatre Royal, if you know it. So how do we go about greening that? Well, some of you may think that's perhaps overdoing it. And then a slightly more artistic or aesthetic option, but certainly it's something we're looking at, because we see huge potential for some of those vast expanses of green or grey roofs to do this. And we've got a draft green roof guidance document that we're currently beginning to think how we roll that out across the city. We're also very, very keen to look at how nocturnal wildlife can be accommodated. There are dark corridors and dark areas in the city, and it's how we actually try and link some of those up as well, so that we connect our nocturnal wildlife. The city is surrounded on 3 sides by water, and actually, being a coastal city, there are identified areas of flood risk from tidal and wave overtopping, and also parts of the city that are prone to flooding as a result of rivers and culverts. And being a marine city, our coastal and shoreline habitats are important to us, and we'll be looking to enhance those. The National Marine Park obviously also gives us an opportunity to look further out into the marine environment, and hopefully altogether that then will allow us to also achieve marine nature recovery. And ultimately, we hope that's going to mean we have more, better, and it's better connected. And I guess the final point to stress is that while that's very much sort of focused on Plymouth, we are very, very aware that we need to be integrated with what's happening around us across our boundaries. So certainly the word that, or the words, collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. It's all about partnership. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Mike. That was absolutely fascinating. I must admit, yeah, some of those initiatives really, really exciting. So, but we can't dwell because we're running way behind time now. We really must dash on. So next speaker is Jess Carter, Chair of Network for Environmental Educators in Devon. And over to you, Jess. Is Jess there?
I'm just checking if she's there. If not, then we'll have to skip.
If not, we move on, and we've saved a little bit of time, although I regret that we won't hear what she has to say about community action. But she doesn't seem to be there. So can we, John, are you all right to come in now? Health and Wellbeing, John Amersfoord, Public Health Specialist at BCC.
Yes, I can come in there.
Thanks,
so good morning, I'm John Amersfoord from Public Health Devon, Public Health Specialist, and I've been asked to talk about the naturally healthy. As we all know, becoming healthy and being more active is good for your mental and physical well-being. And a previous chief medical officer said if physical activity were a drug, we'd be referring it to as the miracle cure, because it helps prevent so many diseases and illnesses, and also supports our general sort of health and well-being. Taking part in outdoor nature-based activities can help reduce anxiety, improve our mental well-being, and helping on top of this. So it's good to be active in nature, not just being active. And obviously the local nature partnership supports this through an initiative called Naturally Healthy, which is run by Active Devon, and Devon County Council has been going since about 2015. And as everybody said, it's very much partnership based. It has 3 main parts: a forum, which is made up of over 100 health, community and environment groups, It's also got Sports England funding a project called Connecting Actively to Nature, and also they do a main public communications campaign. It may seem obvious to people here that enabling people to connect actively to nature is essential to sort of achieve these positive outcomes we want from our communities and environment. We know that it results in positive mental and physical health and well-being. There's several increasing evidence that this is a very good upstream prevention, and it's a tool to reduce and manage the impact of many health conditions. The Naturally Healthy Work and Connecting Actively to Nature programme have been providing opportunities for people across Devon to be more naturally healthy, especially those that have barriers accessing nature and be more active, because just a small increase in activity can have great benefits. And we're not talking running marathons here. We're talking just getting out there, doing something. And those that are less active, due to poor health, deprivation, rural isolation, being in long-term health conditions, those are the ones that can particularly benefit from just having a very small increase in activity.
John, just to let you know, John, I'm sharing my screen now for your slide.
Yeah, I was going to say, could you move on to the next slide, please? Yeah, because I was about to say, it's rather than listen to me say all this, let's actually listen to somebody who's been out there in the community doing this type of work. So if you'd like to play the video now, please, that'd be good.
I suffer with fibromyalgia and arthritis, and all my life I've suffered with pain, and I ended up on high-dose opioids to cope with this pain. I was on them for over 12 years, and I eventually became totally housebound. We have discovered that being out in the fresh air and walking is a natural pain reliever and therapeutic free therapy for depression and anxiety and all sorts of things. I've lost over 7 stone in weight now and gradually getting fitter and fitter. So yeah, I just am now a walking fanatic.
So yeah, I think this, not only that, Louise is now walking.
I suffer with fibromyalgia.
She's so keen, she's going to say it twice. Louise is now a walk leader and a CAN ambassador and takes weekly walks in Decoy Park. And this has obviously also got an area of special scientific interest. You get organisations to talk about the wildlife. So this also contributes to the 5 ways to well-being, which is connecting to people, being physically active, learning, which is a key part. Giving to others, and also just being present in the moment, which is so important in natural environment. So just to say that obviously as we move forward, we now want to work around some more equality, diversity and leadership, inclusion of marginalised groups. We already have sort of 2,000 people over 55, 2/5 of whom have some sort of physical or mental health condition. And the programme is looking to expand to engage younger people, families from deprived areas. We're also aware that some groups of ethnic minorities are less likely to engage with communities, but we are already working with the LNRS to create a chapter on communities in the urban and rural settings. So, and I see that's the end of my time, so I think I can stop there.
Great, thank you very much indeed, John, and thanks to Louise as well for that great insight. Let's move on then to Tim Jones, Chairman of South West Business Council, Chairman of the North Devon Biosphere Foundation, to talk about the business and economy aspects of all this. Over to you, Tim.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Also been involved in the Net Zero Task Force, and also sit on the Local Nature Partnership with your good self. So my take on this is, how do we engage with business on this debate? And logic would suggest that in the current environment, inflation likely to be 10.8% for October. We haven't seen the figures yet, but likely to be. Interest rates rising at the fastest rate for 30 years. Still, amazingly, lower levels of employment than pre-pandemic. Interesting. And the latest FOI figures, Freedom of Information figures coming out of DLUG, show that only a third of the levelling up allocations have yet been made and only 5% spent. So we will know on the 17th, the budget statement, whether there's any new money, and a cynic would say that it's going to be in short supply. So the issue of where this sits as part of the business debate probably would mean that it's at the lower end of business priority and business investment. And that is partially true, but not wholly so. And it's interesting to see how that dynamic is changing. The momentum that's behind this is a really interesting cocktail of different things. Brand value, yeah, a really important element. What's the customer view about businesses who have a green policy? So customer sentiment, really critical if you want to maintain your margin. A very interesting set of stats come back to us about ethical value of employers influencing staff recruitment and retention. Really interesting. And Louise made an interesting point about her approach to a healthy lifestyle. Healthy workforce equals greater productivity. In many cases, we're seeing now that any funding initiatives that are supported for business growth need to be underpinned by a green agenda. That the dreaded acronym ESG, environment, social and governance issues, is now a really important element of funding strategies. Increasingly, regulation is having a significant influence on this, but and this probably is the most important point, that we're now being able to tease out that increasingly there are some solid commercial business opportunities behind this agenda. So is there good empirical evidence to support this? And the answer to that is increasingly so. One of our recent surveys across the business network was really interesting. 50% of those surveys state that they're now moderately or highly dependent on ecosystem services. Now, that's not just limited to the need for a healthy and attractive local environment to assist hospitality, tourism, recreation and leisure activities. It's equally important now to businesses such as manufacturing and construction, where there's a need for clean water, natural materials, a hazard-free environment, and a really interesting one that's coming up fast on the traps, the bottom line benefits of managing waste, the circular economy. In terms of how do we disseminate this stuff, how do we leverage the private sector, then inevitably for hard and oppressed businesses and smaller micro businesses, simple examples create the most powerful narrative. Interesting that Mike Oxford throw up a slide of what they're planning for Plymouth. It's a really interesting example, and these are factually verified, that if you plant 1,000 trees in a large town, it can bring a net positive benefit, £1 million per year. And the reason for that is it's dragging people away from their increasing dependency on online business. So coming to visit high streets, looking at genuine green premiums is interesting. People, if they like the environment, will pay that little bit more. And the dwell time is another interesting factor. People, given that environment in a well-managed, well-cared for environment of trees and landscape in a town centre, will dwell longer. I think probably the stat that amazed me the most, I've still got to verify this, but it's certainly come from a well-authenticated source, is that the fact that a 10%, just hold these words, a 10% increase in tree planting has led to a 15% reduction in violent crime and a 14% decrease in commercial property crime. Interesting. So that is probably indicating that societal issues are really important here. And I think also Mike has picked this point up. It's fascinating to see that this agenda is not just about the rural economy. The debate has now transcended to bridge the gap between the rural and urban continuum. So what next? What are we doing? The biosphere. I think most people are aware that the biosphere project is taking a county lead on a huge range of issues around biodiversity, offsetting, net gain, etc. The huge geography that we've got, both marine and terrestrial, in the river catchments of the Tor and Torridge, but up to the 12-mile limit, including Lundy, is an important element of what we're doing. And if you want to dip in and see some of the fantastic dynamics that the biosphere is delivering, please visit it. I think for me,
sorry, just a 1 minute warning.
Yeah, I think for me, it is what's the most important thing here is that this is an agenda that is beginning to develop a viable link between viable economic communities and this really key issue of social value and human well-being. Local nature recovery strategies are a key element of that roadmap. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Tim. It was very, very upbeat, given the economic circumstances at the moment. Yeah, you sort of pointed a way forward, and that's great. Okay, can we move on then again rapidly to water? Carolyn Cadman, Director of Natural Resources for South West Water. Carolyn, over to you.
Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me now?
Yep, can hear you.
Great, thank you. Sorry. Morning, everyone. Yes, still morning. There we go. Hopefully you can see my slides on screen now. I'm Carolyn Cadman, Director of Natural Resources at South West Water. Prior to joining South West Water earlier this year, I was Chief Exec of Cornwall Wildlife Trust, and I worked on the Cornwall LNRS pilot. So got lots of experience of doing that, and they did include marine. And I think if I was to suggest anything with this, I would include marine as well. So some examples of work that South West Water are delivering in Devon at the moment. We've got the Upstream Thinking Catchment Management Programme. So this is where South West Water works through delivery partners, and in Devon, that's Devon Wildlife Trust and the West Country Rivers Trust. So we work with those organisations to advise landowners on ways in which they can farm their land around drinking water catchments to keep some of the nasties out of the water so that we don't have to then remove it. So that's about removing phosphorus. You can see some of the graphs where the trend lines are going down, using nature to stop those nasty things getting into our drinking water. Another example of what we're doing in the region is invasive non-native species. So we are one of the leading water companies actually at removing non-native species from our water infrastructure. And that's again a big partnership initiative, and we really enjoy working with many of you who are on the call to combat the impacts of invasive non-native species. And thirdly, the Southwest Peatland Partnership, which is hosted and led by South West Water, but again, many of you are involved in that. It's a massive partnership with the target of restoring over 2,500 hectares of peatland across the various uplands in the southwest, Exmoor, Dartmoor, Bodmin and West Penwith down in Cornwall. And that's a brilliant project that we're very happy to take people out to visit if anyone would want to go and see it at some point.
Carolyn, sorry to interrupt, could you go full screen on your slide?
Oh, sorry, apologies. Yes, I can, if I can remember how to do that. Display. Is that better, Sarah?
No. That's it, yes.
Yeah, great. Great, thank you. So one of the questions I was asked to talk about was the challenges that the organisation faces, and the slide in front of you sets out some of the challenges that South West Water is dealing with. Climate change, sea level rise, a lot of our assets in terms of how we manage water, a lot of those assets are based at sea level. So we've got 150 assets that we know over the next 25 years are going to either need to be relocated or they're going to need to move. or they're going to need sea defences. So we've got that as a challenge. We also expect the intensity of rain to increase and periods of drought to increase as climate change impacts on our weather patterns. So that's posing quite a big challenge for us as a water company. As are some of the other things on the screen in front of you. We've got more people living in the southwest and visiting the southwest as well. So we need to make sure that we can supply clean, healthy and safe drinking water, and that we can manage the wastewater that those people need when they're here in the region. Intensive agriculture is also impacting on water quality. The more intense the agricultural activity, the more impact it seems to be having on water quality. So these are some of the challenges that we're looking at as we plan for the next 25 years as a water company. This is the duties that a water company should provide. So as I said earlier, a resilient, safe and affordable water supply and wastewater service for people today and people in the future. A thriving natural environment with clean rivers and sustainable ecosystems. And also we need to be providing excellent service for our vulnerable customers and acting in the long-term interests of society and the environment. So we don't want to be giving huge bills to future users of water from South West Water. So how can the local nature recovery strategies help? Well, in managing drinking water and managing wastewater, the policy framework that South West Water works within, from DEFRA, from Ofwat and other regulators, is increasing the emphasis on nature-based solutions. And so this slide shows some examples of ways in which nature can help to manage water.
Sorry, Carolyn, 1 minute warning.
Great, thank you. I'm sure Harry, who's following me, will talk to beaver management in some way, shape or form. But there's other examples on this slide of nature-based solutions that can help us to manage our wastewater and drinking water services. And that's a key part of my role. Part of my role is to collaborate with people in the region, with landowners, with stakeholders, with other partners, to try and increase the amount of nature-based solutions that we're using as a water company to manage and provide drinking water and wastewater services across Devon and beyond. That's it from me.
Thank you very much indeed, Carolyn. That's great. Harry, final talk.
Right, thank you, Michael. And so I should just say we've got furniture removals people in at the moment, so there may be some noises off, so bear with me. And if you see me suddenly disappearing off the screen, you'll know that the chair I'm sitting on has been put in the removals van. Right, can everyone see the full screen? Is that better?
Seem to have lost it now.
Oh dear.
That's at the end.
Oh dear, just give it a minute. Okay, well, while that's warming up, which I hope it will, in a second, I've been asked to talk a little bit about what the Devon Wildlife Trust is doing, the threats to wildlife, and how I think the local nature recovery strategy can help. And at the moment, my screen is blank. Is everyone else's blank?
Yeah.
Let me have another go.
Oop. It's there.
It's because it's on the last slide, I think, Harry. So you might need to put it onto the first one again.
Okay, right. Let me say sorry about this. I will be as quick as I can. I'll just have to right. Let me go to the beginning. I can't see my screen, which is a slight problem. But let me try again now. Nearly there. So I'm going to share this. Is that working? Can you see that?
No.
Right, okay, I'll just have to do it. I'm sorry, I'll just have to do it not on full screen. I think that's the only way to make it work. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But can you see at least one of the slides now, even though you can see all the others? Yeah, okay. All right. So so that's what I'm going to talk about. So the first thing So as an organisation, we are a landowner. We have 60 nature reserves. This is one called Ven Ottery. It's the first one we ever bought, not the first one we ever had, it's the first one we ever bought. And it's an example of one of the many types of rare habitat we've got in Devon. This is lowland heath. But actually, a bigger area of work we do in Devon is this. It's advising farmers, and Carolyn already mentioned this in view of upstream thinking. We've got a team of over 20 people who provide free advice to farms. In this case, it's not about recreating a wildlife habitat. This is a machine which decompacts soil. And that may not sound a weird thing for a wildlife trust to be doing, but of course, a huge amount of biodiversity is stored in the soil, particularly the topsoil, and soil stores carbon. And if soil is functioning properly, it doesn't just store and sequester carbon, but it also helps to store that, to filter water and prevents that all going downstream and polluting rivers. So an incredibly important thing to do. And of course, most of our wildlife is found on the greater farmland of Devon, not just in nature reserves. So this is a critical thing for us to do. Another thing we do is we try and get whole landscapes to work together for wildlife. So this is a project we're trying to get off the ground at the moment. It's called the East Dartmoor Landscape Recovery Area. As you can see here, you've got some Atlantic oak woodland, aka temperate rainforest. You've got upland heath, but you've also got a lot of land that has been it's been heavily improved. And while we want to stay productive, we also want to enhance it greatly for nature. We'll be doing this over about 12,000 acres of land. Very exciting. Carolyn mentioned beavers. Reintroducing lost mammals and lost species is critical. It may sound like gold plating, but it's not. So beavers are crucial ecosystem and engineers, but also species like these pine martens are as well. If you've never watched the film Why Wolves Help Rivers, narrated by George Monbiot, then do please watch it, because it gives a really impressive and short articulation of why these missing pieces in the jigsaw of our ecology are so important to have back. And that's why we introduce these back into the landscape, not just because they're nice to have, but because they're so critical. Right, try and get the slide presentation going. But of course, we all know that our wildlife is in a lot of trouble. So a couple of months ago, this very alarming report came out, the Living Planet report. So 69% decline in animal species between 1970 and 2020. The last version of this that came out about 5 years before gave a figure of 50%. So that's a pretty alarming increase. But actually on the right-hand side, you can see a little spider. That's a strawberry spider, and that was photographed from one of our nature reserves. It's not actually the big animals like these primates. It's the small things. It's the invertebrates. They're the ones that are really most threatened. They are declining much, much faster. And there's a lot of reasons why this is happening. But the most critical one is this. We are simply not protecting enough area of land and sea effectively for wildlife. So if you look on the left, this shows the area of sea that's protected effectively for wildlife, and it's 8%. And the reason for that, as I was saying in the chat earlier on, is a lot of these marine protected areas, marine conservation zones, special areas of conservation, SPAs, etc., are not effectively managed, even though they may be protected on paper. So only 8% of the 30% we need at sea is protected. You look on land, it's worse. It's just over 3%. So AONBs, national parks, they are not designations for nature, they're designations for landscape. And even if you look at our SSSIs, the areas that are legally protected, less than half of that area is in good condition. So take that into account, and only 3%, 10% of what we actually need is effectively protected for wildlife. And that, more than anything else, is why we're in this pickle. So what do we need to do?
1 minute.
How can I'm going to run over a minute, I'm afraid. Sorry, Bella, because of what happened. I'll be as quick as I can. So what do we need to do about this? Well, I think the local nature recovery strategy is going to be absolutely crucial. And this slide I saw appear briefly in the video earlier on. But what we need to do is start by identifying the wildlife we've already got in Devon. Sounds easy, but it's not. It's a huge job. We've done it, which is great. The next thing we need to do is look at the sort of what I call the potentialities, what land could be if we gave it a chance. And maps like this one show one answer to that question. What could land be for wildlife if we gave it a chance? And it's crucial not just to do this where we think it's convenient, but to help us achieve that key 30% target we need to. And then we can use this to try and make sure that those fragments of land that are restored and recreated are properly connected, and that we do this on the marine environment as well as the terrestrial environment. I'm sorry, I haven't got time to show a marine version of this. And then, of course, what we have to use this to do is to link to other agendas as well. It's really crucial. It informs the local planning process, that we can use this to target elms. We know we're going to get into some rough times financially and things are going to be cut back. So if we've got money coming for elms, let's direct that to where we think it will have maximum effect. Exactly the same goes for biodiversity net gain, which is due to become statutory this year. And other nature-based solutions, where it's climate change mitigation or water quality or flood alleviation or health or soil restoration, any of these other things, if we can use this mapping to direct funds to where it will have the most impact, then that's exactly what we should be doing. So in summary then, what can the local nature recovery strategy and the nature recovery network that is a key part of it do, and where can it work best? Well, I would say 5 things. It needs to be spatially planned, and that's what this mapping is all about. That's absolutely critical. It needs to be evidence-based. We have loads and loads of evidence. There are some gaps. We have loads of evidence. It's about coordinating that and bringing it all together. It needs to be locally developed, but also nationally connected. Really important that it's us, not someone remote, who tells us how to do this. But equally, we don't want what we do in Devon to be completely different to what's happening in Cornwall and Somerset. It must be statutory, in my view, because statutory gives it teeth. But equally, it's got to be collective responsibility. We can't just leave it to the statutory bodies and say they're responsible. All of us have got to pull our figure out to make this happen. And us at the Devon Wildlife Trust and all of us in the environmental NGOs are absolutely willing and wanting to pull out our fingers and do our bit for this. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Harry, thanks. You've rounded that off so well with a call to arms, really, which I think is the sort of message that I take out of this morning. We've heard some brilliant presentations and crossing a big territory, and I mean the sort of little messages that come out for me. This is economically important. You know, Tim made that very, very clear. It's important for our health, mental and physical, as well as for the health of nature. It's about urban areas as well as rural areas. It's clearly about farming, and farmers are hugely important in this. It's about water, as well as the creatures that live within the water and live on the land. So, you know, this is a huge agenda. And as Sarah said early on, we're sort of starting the process around local nature recovery strategies. We're sort of over time. Sarah, I don't know whether we probably do need to stick to time, don't we? Because it's not fair on people if they're sort of hanging on, wondering whether anything else is going to be said. So, I mean, unless you tell me otherwise, Sarah, I think what I'll say is this: the questions will be looked at afterwards. Anything that we can add into those and get in touch with people directly or on the website. Go on the website and have a look. We'll do so. The next steps are quite clearly to continue the work. As Sarah has already said, we have a team in place that are busy working on this anyway. There will be a conference in the spring, which I think will give an opportunity for a lot more in-depth conversation around some of these issues. And it would be nice to see some of you, rather than just a little mugshot, actually see you in person and chat over coffee and chat over lunch. So I'm kind of looking forward to all that as well. I think that's probably about it, really. I see some lovely kind comments coming up on the chat. Thank you. I'm glad people appreciated it, but don't hesitate if you want to say that there are things we got wrong or are getting wrong, say that as well. You know, the game can be improved by all of us involved in this. There's no doubt about that. So I think that's it, Sarah, unless there's anything else you want me to say.
No, I just want to say a massive thank you to you and all the speakers, and Bella for organising it, and we've all stayed here till the end. And sorry, we tried to pack a lot in, so sorry everybody that we didn't have time for questions at the end. But please do go on the webinar and
yeah. Good. Thanks, Sarah, and thanks for all you do. And thanks particularly to the speakers. I mean, you all pretty well kept your 5 minutes, and you obviously bowed to the pressure of Bella's instructions. But an awful lot can be crammed into 5 minutes, as we saw. Much to think about. Thank you very much, everybody. Nice to see you, or know that you're there. Talk again soon. Cheers for now. Bye.
Bye. We just stay here, Michael.
Yeah, I'll stay.